Is there an evolutionary advantage to being colorblind? Okay, it quickly goes non-evolutionary. In your case, Brett, does it help to not fall for the vote red or vote blue dichotomy? Thoughts on, and now totally different within the same question, thoughts on doubling the number of reps? We've had 435 for almost 100 years. Could more seats mean less government capture?
I'm probably going to punt on that last bit. I would have to think about the implications. They're not immediately obvious to me. But let's talk about colorblindness.
Yeah.
First of all, you should know, Eric and I have an unusual kind of colorblindness. It's not red-green. We have the identical colorblindness, which we know because there are these marvelous pebble tests that assess which cones are doing what, where you've probably seen them. It's a round display that has these different sized dots in it, and there's some number written in the dots.
The salient thing about them is they're differently colored dots.
Right. But here's the thing that you may not know, because most people see color approximately the same way, is that some of those tests have a number in them that only a person with a certain kind of color blindness can see. And Eric and I see the same thing on these charts, just one chart after another.
So 90% of us are seeing 7, and 90% of the remaining people see nothing, and then 10% of the 1% of people, and these numbers are all wrong, it's much less than 1% of the population that has this particular color blindness, see the number 2 instead,
right,
which no one else can see at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So Eric and I could go through the book separately, and we'd come up with exactly the same answers, and people who see color normally would all be in agreement about what they saw too. So anyway, the reason I raised that is because red-green color blindness pretty clearly does have an advantage, and marvelously, the advantage seems not to be an individual level advantage, it's a population level advantage. In other words, it's not like you'd all be better off being colorblind, but you're better off to be in a population that has some colorblind people, just like you are better off being in a population that has some left-handers. And so there is clearly, and I find that this is true for me too with my colorblindness, is that there is an increased sensitivity to pattern. I can find things other people can't find. And in fact, we don't know.
You're talking about visual pattern, but I wonder if it doesn't track into other kinds of pattern as well.
Well, I think it has all kinds of downstream
analytical pattern.
Yeah, for one thing, I think there's probably something to the idea that if you live in a world of people who agree what color stuff is, and you're seeing,
we're not lying.
You see it. Well, no, believe me. One of my favorite things is when you color normies get into a disagreement about what color something is. That really warms my heart.
Like mauve versus taupe.
Whatever it is. I've seen some crazy arguments, and I like to just sit back and listen, because usually it's just, it's me who's off, and I know it.
Well,
right?
can I just claim oppression status here, that I live in a very small population of 4 here in the nuclear family, and I passed to our 2 children my father's red-green colorblind gene. I, of course, I carry it, but it doesn't manifest in me because it's on the X, and it gets it's recessive. So I live in a family with 3 colorblind people at varying degrees. You've got 2 different types, but I'm me the color normie are actually in the minority.
You are in the minority. But look, I do think there's something to the experience of, like, week after week seeing a world with your own eyes. I mean, it's very compelling what you see with your eyes. And then to have the world say, no, you're not seeing what you think you're seeing, does lead you, to have the sort of confidence of, well, sometimes you do see something that other people can't see. Because, I never knew whether my dissertation work on tent-making bats was facilitated by the fact that because I don't see color normally, the bats were less successful at deceiving me with their tents. So after I figured out the trick of how to find these things, I got very good at it. And I could find sometimes, 200 in a day if I, was really trying.
And these things are super hard to find.
They're really
it's hard. When the first time you walk into a lowland rainforest, a tropical jungle, you can't see anything but a wall of green. But even once you've spent, years wandering around these forests, it's much harder for me to find these things than for you. And I know exactly what I'm looking for at this point.
Right. Yeah. You've seen hundreds of them.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all an aside. The point is, yes, there is an advantage. The advantage may come in the form of just the same way we sometimes colorize pictures from Jupiter, for example, to highlight different things, that the normal color image of the red spot reveals different things than a false color image. Having some people who just have a different color wheel in operation reveals things that will be hidden. It is certainly true that during World War II, I believe, World War II, colorblind people were used to spot camouflage from airplanes because they were less easily deceived by the color of the camouflage, and that pattern may be more general, but it may also just have this cultural impact where if you have the experience of being out of sync with your population and what it sees, it may train you to be a little more dogged when you think you see something that other people don't see. You pursue it and they say, no, you're getting it wrong. And it's like, well, am I really?
No, and we've talked about this in a number of places, that there may be particular ability to detect pattern because you're not focusing on the main thing that people are seeing, to colorblindness, but left-handedness, being on the spectrum, all these sorts of forms of neurodiversity. Basically, any way that you are walking through life such that you're not effectively totally neurotypical and normie, to use that language, puts you out of step enough that you may start questioning other things that everyone else is accepting.
Yeah. And you can force this. Expats sometimes have an interesting perspective.
Being outside of your own culture is huge for this. It's one of the reasons I keep on, this is one of my drum beats consistently, like, go experience life outside of your own, especially if it's a privileged little bubble, as it is for most of the activists, for instance, and just be there among other people doing their own thing and watch how many of the things that you thought were just sort of fundamental to being human are just done differently over here. And sometimes it matters and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's random and sometimes, most of the time, it's not. And usually, if it's persistent, whatever they're doing is better in their environment. Whatever it was happening over here was better in this environment. And it reveals a lot of the biases that we actually carry around with us about sort of just what it is to be a human, a man, an American, whatever it is.